I can tell you all these things about the rib cage, but when you find the relief yourself, you felt it, you know it in that moment. Fuck me, like I'm liberated. And there's no like, well, you got to move the rib cage here and then the diaphragm. I can tell you all of the technicalities. I can show you the pictures of the waveforms that I want to see in your breather, right? But when you've felt it, you know. And teaching from that embodied place is like, I was suffering miserably and then I wasn't. And something happened and I felt it. And I've gone back into my own body again and again to find those pathways. What comes from that space is belief. Right, is a deep sense of self-belief. And when I'm training a practitioner, I want them to feel that so deeply in their system that they believe in the work. They're like, this thing fucking works because it worked for me. And that doesn't mean it will work for other people. And it doesn't mean it will work for other people in the same way. We've got to be so careful of that projection. And when we extrapolate that across enough data and enough data sets, we start to see that our client is this wonderful puzzle where we can guide them into finding that same experience themselves. And we can eventually.
Welcome to the Heart of Man podcast, a podcast for any man seeking to live in alignment with his deepest core and lead a life of profound meaning and connection. I'm your host, Alex Lehman, and I'm here to empower you through transformative conversations, eye-opening insights, and practical wisdom. Join me now as we venture into the heart of man. Let's dive in.
Edward Dangerfield is back for his third round on the Heart of Man. And while we've explored a wide range of topics in our past conversations, from relationships to coming home to our bodies, to finding sovereignty and integrity within our own sexual expression, we had yet to come together to explore the core element that first brought us into connection, the breath. Already early on in my work with Edward, I'd often hear him boldly claim, the way we breathe is the way we live. And over time, I came to see just how true that statement really is. And while there are many forms of breathwork out there, similar to there being different styles of yoga or meditation, of all the practices I've explored, none have felt more powerful or life-altering than the innovative and emergent technique of Facilitated Breath Repatterning, or FBR for short, which can be seen as a unique synthesis of breath and bodywork that I was trained in over 4 years ago. Within the breathwork world, it is common knowledge that body-based styles of breathing can help us access non-ordinary states of consciousness, giving space for subconscious material to surface and allowing for the completion of incomplete reflexes and the release of unprocessed emotions. In FBR, however, I had yet to find a modality that so systematically focuses on both adjusting breathing mechanics and guiding the movement of breath through the body, something Edward has relentlessly refined over a decade of devoted practice. Now, for anyone who might be wondering how this relates back to you, if you consider that we breathe on average 21,000 to 26,000 times a day, and if we've habitually learned to breathe poorly or in maladaptive ways, this means we're repeating that poor pattern thousands of times every single day. But if we can shift the way we breathe subconsciously, the effect on our physical, mental, and emotional health can be profound. That's certainly been true for me. For anyone who might not know him yet, Edward is widely respected within the breathwork community as a nervous system specialist, teacher, and the visionary founder of FBR and Breathwork Bali. He himself came to this work as a result of surviving a near-death experience where he found himself caught in an avalanche. This event left him grappling with the aftermath of PTSD, which brought him down a path of seeking the tools and practices that could help him heal and regulate his nervous system. On his journey of exploring various healing modalities, he was eventually introduced to the power of conscious connected breathwork and never looked back. With a deep commitment to supporting others, Edward has dedicated himself to helping individuals feel at home within their bodies by reclaiming the power of their own breath. In my eyes, it's absolutely no understatement to say that this practice has been revolutionary in my life. While I've continued to learn from different mentors and teachers over the years, I've remained devoted to this practice as the foundational work from which everything else is built. For me, it felt important for us to come together in this way out of recognition for just how powerful this modality really is. I see that a core part of my mission is to support spreading it, and in this conversation, I seek to contribute to that by offering something that does this practice justice. For those who haven't yet experienced it for themselves, I believe this conversation does just that. And now, let's dive into this incredible dialogue with Edward, unpacking the groundbreaking technique of FBR.
Edward, my friend, it's really good to have you back on the podcast. I welcome you back to Heart of Man.
Thanks so much, brother. Happy to be here.
It's interesting. We've had a number of these conversations, and I noticed that ever since we had booked this conversation in, I felt a lot of anticipation to have it. And it's somewhat ironic to me as well that we've had so many conversations within this studio, but it seems like the one topic that I'd imagine we'd have, other people might imagine we'd have, we just never ended up happening, which is around the breath. And this is really where I'd love to bring all of our focus, all of our attention today. And considering as well that, especially over the last 2 months, I have been diving very deeply into the breath again once more in a one-on-one capacity with you. I feel my inspiration and motivation for this practice and why it means so much to me, having returned in full flesh. And as a result, I really want as well other listeners to receive value from it. So I'm very excited for us to be here and for us to have this conversation.
I'm very excited as well, brother. Thank you.
All right. So where I would really like to begin, and I guess I'm conscious as well of listeners who might not know you. I'm conscious of listeners who might have never experienced this modality of breathwork and might as well have their own understanding of what breathwork is. And I usually like to, because I recognize we're going to get very scientific today, we're going to get very technical in some ways, and I like to as well blend such elements with story in. And the thing I really want to blend in is actually my first story of coming to my first ever breathwork journey. And while there's different ways that I can tell it, I recognize I actually shared that first journey in this book that's right in front of me called Connected, where we shared some of our tales of facilitated breath repatterning. And I just want to read that out loud for the next
Yeah, I would love that.
1 to 2 minutes, just for the listeners as well to receive value from that. And we'll get started from there. Fear began to wash over me. I was panting, gasping for air. My entire body felt like it was vibrating as I was increasingly tensing up with each passing moment. My hands and feet were cramping. I was sweating profusely. What the hell is going on here? I was 20 minutes into my first ever breathwork journey, and I can tell you I've never experienced anything like it before. This truly was something different. Confronted by these intense sensations moving through me, I noticed myself to be in this entrancing dreamlike state where it felt as if I was both there and strangely at the same time not. The next thing I knew, I was flooded by tears. A wave of grief came over me, and I didn't know why. It was surfacing deep from within my body. A part of me wanted to hold back the tears and appear strong, a reflex I was used to, but something told me not to hold back. The next moment, I felt the touch of a hand on my chest. Another pair of hands came to support my head. I remember hearing the encouraging words of the facilitators, that my tears are welcome, that my voice is welcome, and that I'm safe. I felt supported, and I noticed myself softening. In that moment, I gave myself full permission to feel the grief. As I did, images of old memories appeared. I recalled moments when I was young, where I experienced the visceral sensation of being alone, and I connected to that pain. In the flash of a moment, I connected the dots. How I had never allowed anybody to get too close to me for fear they may leave me. How I'd learned to carefully read people and adapt who I was to ensure I'd always fit in. How I'd feel the continuous need to prove myself in order to be seen, recognized, and appreciated. It dawned on me that I'd developed these behaviors to ensure that I would never have to feel that pain again. I realized how I created that narrative about myself, that I'm not good enough or loved, in order to make sure that I'd never step out of the bounds of my comfort zone. As I was holding myself in the pain I'd really been trying to avoid for so long, it all came down to one realization, that this experience was now in the past. It was what happened then, and today I can make a new choice. I didn't need to play out that story any longer. This wasn't just a thought. Instead, it felt like an embodied experience that seemed to permeate every cell of my being. I walked out of that breathwork session not being able to fully articulate what happened, but I knew one thing. Something had shifted, and I knew I wanted to come back. I knew I wanted more of this. This definitely brings up a lot of memories and flashes of images, and I recall coming out of that experience, and my first gaze was towards you, and I had this visceral sense of, what the fuck was this? And I had reflected on the fact that I think my mind was still catching up to the fact that my body already knew that I wanted to do this and that I really wanted to train in this. And it's been profound for me to see where the evolution as well had taken me over the last almost 4.5 years. So I actually want to begin this conversation asking you, why does this matter to you so much? And for anyone who's listening in and who might not be aware of what facilitated breath repatterning is, why might this be helpful or even relevant to them?
Yeah, thank you, bro. I was really touched by hearing what you just read about your own journey and your experience. And if you read my chapter in the book, it's alarmingly similar. My first experience of connecting my breath in this way is almost, the exact same similarity of being there, but also having this witness consciousness, this awareness of watching myself, and then receiving support in a really good way. And I think, I recognize that in you. I could see that you were having such a similar experience to me, and I recognize that in you. And that recognition, I think, is part of why this work's so important for me. It's because right now I'm in a really good place in my life, but back then I really wasn't. When I first got touched by connected breathing, we're going back over a decade now. And I think, if people meet me now, on the surface, quite a few people look like they've got it together, right? But really, when we get underneath it a little bit more deeply, we want to know, is this a facade or a mask, or is this genuinely the embodied state that someone's living from? And 10 years later of exploring the nervous system and my own incomplete reflexes, my parts, my behavior, and my breath, get to a point where I'm very content with my life. And so that journey from alcoholism, depression, and getting very close to taking my own life, the journey from where I was then to now, my own lived experience of that is what motivates me to share this with other people in a few different ways. One is one-on-one. I love sharing this with people, who are really, really fucking suffering, because I was as well. So that's very meaningful. And, I still work oftentimes with clients one-on-one, and I love that depth and intimacy so much. But also what I've been loving seeing more recently is the work shared, with more practitioners, and more practitioners sharing it with more people over the world. And that's what we're seeing now with this kind of groundswell of a movement of FBR practitioners that's starting to kind of build some momentum.
And to return back to the question just for a moment as well, for anyone who might be listening in who has not experienced this work, how could this be relevant to their experience and as well their life, and as well maybe they're going as well through similar challenges, and I wonder how they might as well, what do you think they might as well receive in terms of benefit by listening to this conversation?
I think it's important to just frame up the difference in breathwork styles a little bit to answer this question. Pranayama and Wim Hof is using the mind to control the breath in the body. It's very, very powerful, and we can create incredible state changes, a lot of stability, increases of capacity, gentle and steady change over time. Also, big retentions can create some big oscillations of breath and energy in the body. And then what we're working with is fundamentally, firstly, a connected breathing practice. So conscious connected breathing is a practice, which is where we're looping breath. I think it's important to state that this creates a big shift in the body and in the mind, right? And so the body and the brain, and therefore the mind, is changing. When I first accessed conscious connected breathing, my relationship to substances that change states of consciousness was basically alcohol and caffeine and adrenaline sports, right? So I was pretty well versed and habituated in those. And I was comfortable in those states, like being quite drunk or having like a big surge of adrenaline from sports. But I hadn't ever, at that point, ever in my life, used any substance that was mind altering. So a psychedelic or a substance that impacted my endocrine system. And so I didn't have a frame of reference. Like I literally never felt anything like that, right? And so the first time I connected breath, I moved into a state of awareness, of conscious awareness that I'd never experienced. For listeners that have done psychedelic drugs, this style of breath work will create a psychedelic experience. For listeners that have never done psychedelics, you've got no frame of reference. There's no possibility that you can understand what's about to happen. It's difficult to explain that. It's like, we've talked about analogies around this, around like trying to explain snow. Well, it's cold and it's white, but like until you've really like rolled in it, you don't have a sense of it. Yeah. So that's kind of it, right? Yeah.
I can definitely vouch for that. And, as well, having gone through a wide array of explorations as well in my own life, including psychedelics, I can definitely say that I can say wholeheartedly and with absolute confidence that this practice can take me to these places, if not even further and even deeper.
Yeah.
So I guess let's explore this very important question, Edward, which is, what is facilitated breath repatterning, and how does it differ from any other form of body-based style of breath work?
Yeah, thanks, bro. So FBR, Facilitated Breath Repatterning, is the label that we've collectively chosen to call a style of breathwork that's been emergent here in breathwork Bali, and now is shared with a few different schools, kind of under agreement and reciprocity in Australia and Europe a little bit as well. And this style of practice is essentially, a very precise way of adjusting the movement of breath in the body using touch, primarily touch, and also some verbal cues. And so it's a bodywork practice along with breath practice. It's a harmonization of the client and the facilitator. And it's a call and response between the nervous system of the client and the facilitator's direction. It requires the facilitator to have a deep and embodied practice in FBR themselves. And so they have to have done a serious amount of hours to really kind of get how breath moves in the body. And then, it's a guided journey, usually around an hour and 15 minutes, of the client observing, watching, and looping breath with hands-on touch and facilitation set to music. Usually it's delivered in a sandwich format of some conversation, the breath work with touch, and then some conversation at the end.
I just consider the fact, so one of the things that, I was introduced to before facilitated breath repatterning was yoga. And one of the things as well that we explored was the Yoga Sutras. And we explored this idea of a sutra, which is essentially like, 3 words, but it means so much. And it's like this, it could be an entire universe within that in one sutra itself. And that's just what I considered when you had just described what facilitated breath repatterning is, because there's so much to it. And I think we'll be spending the next few hours just exploring what you had just said, and also bringing listeners or viewers up to speed around what does this even mean, and as well, why might this be useful or valuable, but also very impactful. I guess where I'd maybe want to just revert back to is I want to hear from you what happens within the body when we breathe in this way, in a looping manner, in a conscious connected breath style. And would you be able to bring us a little bit up to speed around the science of it, and how does it as well bring us into these non-ordinary states of consciousness?
Yeah, that's a big question for sure. We're still really deep in research, and I'm loving that as well. But the essence really of it is breathing is behavioral and breathing is habituated. And so we have a frame of breath that we usually breathe within, like throughout the day. And sometimes we get exposed to different styles or ways that we're bringing breath through the body. So yeah, if we're a runner, like when we go running, then our breath moves a little bit differently, but we're habituated to running, right? But if you take someone that's not a runner and you get them to run, then their breath has to move differently. So their breath then has to start to adapt, right? And so essentially what we're exploring when we lie someone down, we take away all of the muscles of stabilization of the body, and then we can see where there is habituated holding or tension in the muscles, and we can see where muscles of movement and muscles of breathing are moving breath in the body behaviorally. So we start to see the behavior of the breath mechanics. And then as a facilitator, we can start to change the way that that breath is moving and take it out of habituated pattern. And when the client starts to move out of their habituated patterns of breathing, they start to move into non-habituated patterns of breathing. Yeah. And because of that, their blood chemistry and their breath, it starts to move into ways that then don't usually breathe or may have never breathed.
Yep.
And as they move into that, all of the other systems of the body respond, right? So the kidneys and the adrenals and the whole endocrine system, and then the brain starts to shift its functionality, the blood pH changes, and people start to experience these non-ordinary states, which there are a lot, and then the body starts to physically respond to that, and we start to explore the relationship that the client has to the non-ordinary state of consciousness as well.
I guess one of the things that arises from me that I might just want to bring in here and see if you might have anything to add, but what makes this practice so impactful to me, at least, is that it's somewhat disabled. I don't know if disabled is the right word, but it disables the default mode network, which is, essentially, I don't know what one would describe it, but essentially it's a set of different mechanisms or structures that protect us and ensure that we operate in such a way to remain safe. And it is within these states that this becomes somewhat disabled, whereas as a result, it actually gives us space and provides opportunity for sub and unconscious material to actually come to the surface. And I think one of the things that you're highlighting in many ways as well is the ways people are breathing subconsciously. So their subconscious breathing patterns are coming to the surface. Why might it be valuable for these subconscious breathing patterns to come to the surface for a facilitator, and what do we do with them as facilitators when we see those arising to the surface?
Yeah, this is really good, right? The DMN, the default mode network, is this psychological, physiological, neurological idea, right? And it varies within each human. And as you said, it keeps us operating in kind of our safe and healthy window of tolerance, around psyche and physiology. And so when people start to loop breath, we're taking them into these non-ordinary states of breathing, conscious awareness. The DMN gets softened back. The protective mechanisms, get like gently disabled. And then people start to breathe into some of the areas or spaces that they don't normally. And what happens is they start to befriend, maybe breath rhythms and then emotional states, feeling states that they're not so comfortable in. In your case, in the example you gave at the beginning of this was grief, right? You started to breathe into that, right? And there was this awareness that you were safe. You were safe to feel it. You were safe to experience it. You were safe to cry. And safety is relative. But for you, there was an ability to go into an emotional state that had previously been inaccessible due to the potentiality of overwhelm, maybe in your amygdala or maybe, within your own relationship to yourself. And you deepened your ability to be with yourself and the spectrum of emotional states. And in doing so, afterwards, you had a felt sense experience that you were changed. You were somehow liberated. And your body already knew, as your psychological brain was starting to catch up. And the integration of that mentally maybe took a little bit of time. There was a deeper body-based knowing that was emergent within you.
Yeah. Hearing that, I guess what I want to highlight is that as we move into these subconscious breathing patterns, with a facilitator present, it actually provide us the opportunity to potentially move into qualities, reflexes, emotions that we might have not fully addressed, have not fully processed, experiences that we have maybe even shadowed. And essentially we're given a space or an opportunity, an invitation to actually go in and lean into these spaces. And as a result, I guess create a little bit more dynamism within the ways that we can breathe, but also the emotional textures that are available to us.
Yeah, I love this. Like, I think it's important to state, like, very directly and clearly, most humans breathe really badly, right? If we were to kind of judge this, and so many people, I've spent the last 10 years teaching people how to breathe, and we often get like these wise characters that reflect back to me or us as breathwork practitioners. Well, I've been breathing my whole life, and it's just like, yeah, how's that working out for you? Like, you've been breathing really badly or poorly or terribly your whole life, or like, yeah, really averagely, but. Yeah, it's tough to say that to people, and I want to be compassionate and caring, but at the same time, most humans have like a lot of dysfunction in their breathing. Yeah, we're starting to have some awareness around it, and now practitioners, medical professionals or physiotherapists, they're starting to get a sense of this, and then people get labeled with, yeah, you've got a breathing pattern disorder, and with no clear like diagnosis of like what it actually is or how to move forward or how to improve it, right? And then the challenge then is like, well, what do I do with this? It's not a medical condition. It's not a mental condition. It's not a physiological condition. So where does it fall, right? And the reality is breathing is the foundation of life, right? For everything that's living is breathing, and we want to breathe well. So we want to get into this space of understanding there is not one right way to breathe. This is a very dynamic thing that we're exploring, and it's very technical, and it's actually very difficult as well, right? So I want to bring that to the listeners and just be like, yeah, just explore how you're breathing, and we would like to improve that. It's impacting all of life.
I want to explore that a little bit more fully with you, and explore this idea with you around how do we want to breathe optimally. And, the answer to that is dynamically, as you had communicated.
Yeah.
But I want to flesh that out a little bit more. And I guess also I just want to bring to awareness of all the things that we really need in order to stay alive, whether it's food, whether it's water, whether it's sleep, whether it's breathing. Breathing is the thing that, we do 21,000 to 26,000 times a day, roughly.
Yeah.
So just consider the fact that if each of these breaths is maladaptive, and this is also something I want to bookmark for later, but there's also this recognition that each breathing pattern will have a subsequent emotion or a certain emotional expression connected to it. We have to consider that if we can actually create fundamental and systemic changes to the ways that we're breathing, just consider what changes we can create in our lives with that.
Yeah. I love it, right? This is the essence of it, is just creating ease. And what ease for me looks like in life is that my internal landscape is matching, my environment. Yeah, and that's the functionality of the nervous system, is to relay that information. It's to take in the environment and then relay it to my internal landscape and have those match, right? And so our breath rhythm ought to be proportionate or appropriate to the stimulus that we're receiving in that moment of life. And that's where, as an example, like sleep apnea is, would be happening where someone's asleep and somehow subconsciously, unconsciously, their nervous system is still protecting them and stopping them from breathe fully and dynamically. That could show up as like gripping in the abdominal wall or a lack of flare in the rib cage. And that's going to be impacting rest.
Sure. And
so 8 to 9 hours of our breathing is subunconscious. So we want that to be working well.
And currently we had addressed the more behavioral and habitual aspects to the ways we might be breathing. But I guess also one aspect that I might just want to bring in is when we've had overwhelming experiences, perhaps even traumatic experiences that essentially don't actually become fully completed. Within our first podcast, you had addressed the activation cycle. And if that is not fully completed, if we don't actually come out of that fight or flight mechanism and come into a position where we can reorientate ourselves back towards a more parasympathetic state, the nervous system will still perceive that we need to protect ourselves from that threat that might have happened
Yeah,
5, 10, 20 years ago.
exactly.
And so, this is also where we can get stuck within these patterns, including as well our breath, where something that might have happened at a particular time, through the body, we're still considering, oh, we're still in that position, or we got to protect ourselves from that ever happening again.
Yeah, it's important to acknowledge, right, that a lot of talk therapists work with the mind, psyche, schemas, parts. It's great, right?
Yeah.
And then a lot of somatic therapists work with the body, and we work with both.
Yes.
And it's important to recognize, like, right now, there's a bit of a swing towards soma and somatic work being like, this is the answer. This illusion that it's stuck in the body. I mean, if it's stuck in the body, well, the brain is in the body as well, right? So we have to recognize it's all one. We need to work with all of it at the same time. And so, yeah, some of these experiences that you talk about, like the idea of a reflex or a gripping or a holding, it's in the body, but it's being remembered in the brain. So we need to address both simultaneously.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, ultimately we're healing, or bringing together this concept of a split between the mind and the body. They're always one.
If we can maybe just ground it in as an example, and you have full permission to share as well to my own experiences. I'm very happy for others to hear about that. But so how do we work with the mind, but then also with the body?
Well, I mean, I think the simple illusion is that we're always doing both. Yeah, and any practitioner that says they're only working with the body, they're failing to address that the mind is just hanging out here the whole time anyway, right? So the mind is embodied and the body is mindful.
Sure.
And so, yeah, it's just always one. Yeah. So I mean, it's like I'm not going to need to refute that, because it's obvious if all of the listeners take a moment to consider this, like, how could you consider that the brain is separate from the body? And then we're using words like brain, body, and then mind, right? And so the mind is the collective of every cell in some way. Yeah.
Well, challenge me on this, but I consider as well, or I perceive that there has been a change as well within you over the last maybe year or two, where you had maybe brought more of the top-down approach into as well your work, particularly exploring as well modalities such as internal family systems, or as well parts work, where we acknowledge that within our psyche we're not just this mono mind, quote unquote, but we're actually an ecosystem of a lot of different parts coming together, and then as well this expresses itself in our bodies. So I'd love to hear, has there been changes as well with your association to it? I hear you as well often referencing Jonathan Haidt, who had explored this idea of the elephant and the rider. So help our listeners as well understand just that ecosystem between the elephant and the rider, and the importance of exploring both of this.
Yeah, it's really great. Thank you, bro. Yeah, I mean, you're right. Like, we've been hanging out a lot. And in the last year and a half, I mean, I think it's really been our good friend Ian Stratton who's really brought this work to me around both, understanding a little bit more around how to effectively work with parts. What I've enjoyed around it is that the frame that Ian's works with is IFS, Internal Family Systems, a work of Dick Schwartz. And I started to notice the way that Ian was navigating me in a therapeutic setting. There were behavioral elements that I could feel in the way that I would move or breathe or express, that we started to be able to label really concretely. I'll give you an example, right? One of them would be like Jeff, my anger, right? So
we spoke about him actually in the last podcast.
Yeah, right. So that, or maybe like the Iceman, right? Who's this freezing quality, right? Where I notice that someone's about to manipulate me, or there is direct manipulation, either consciously or unconsciously from someone else. The Iceman comes on and he'll freeze my whole body, and he stops me being compassionate. And the reason for that is my compassion has been leveraged in the past, right? And so the Iceman comes on and he freezes me to get really crystal clear and show the other person what they're doing. And if they're able to see it, then he'll soften back. And so we started to understand that there was a direct bridge between my physiology and my psychology. And that was the sort of the coming together of using these mapping of my own parts to understand that. We started to see them like on the table, on the treatment table, in the rhythms of breath. We started to see like warrior parts come on, right? Fierce warrior parts that could power up. And then we started to see the constellation, right? We started to see that warrior part was actually like protecting the tenderness of the heart.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's it.
And so instead of just magnifying the warrior part and giving that more fuel and empowering that and praising that more, which our culture and society does, what we started to play with individually and collectively as a team was, what would it be like if we started to soften back some of those parts that run the show a lot, right?
Yeah.
And we started to give them little vacations, just even for a session, and just be like, hey, sit over here in the chair and take a vacation, right? What else would emerge, and what could we as a human get more in touch with psychologically within ourselves?
Yeah, it's been incredible to witness the changes within your work, and also how you've been integrating that and how powerful it's been, and as well me incorporating that more and more into my work as well. And I amusingly actually had a session with Ian Stratton this morning, right? And we had explored this warrior within me, where he can have a very harsh and critical nature. He's a fucking leader, and he's an entrepreneur, and he's like, I want to get down to business, right? But I guess the shadowy side of him is the criticism that comes, and the shaming and the guilting that is as well there with the very fiery nature.
Yeah.
And what's so ironic about it is that there's an aspect, or maybe ironic is not the right word, but like what is essentially protecting is this very soft and very tender aspect of me that didn't really have anybody that protected him from the adversity that happened.
Yeah.
That didn't feel safe.
Yeah.
And so this was essentially where that warrior stepped in and could be like, I'm going to fucking protect this guy.
Yeah. Yeah. And then we talked a little bit about his potentiality for having like a tyrannical nature. Absolutely. As well, right? How he becomes a little bit of a tyrant, a little bit vigorous, right? What I've been exploring with you is that third energy center, right? But the diaphragm and that warrior nature, and how it tightens in the rib cage. And then anatomically and physiologically, it changes the shape of the diaphragm, and the diaphragm then has tendons that travel up to the pericardium, which holds the heart. Mm-hmm. So we're watching this fiery nature that then starts to pull on the heart space and then impacts your heart rate and your heart rate variability. Yep. And so, yeah, it's kind of fascinating that we then start to explore that with wearables and look at the data on that, and then start to make comparisons around the tightness of your rib cage in relationship to your pericardium, and then even have the opportunity to compare that to like other clients I have and or other chest and diaphragm configurations. So we start to map these psychological parts or behaviors that you can relate really deeply to. We start to map them onto physiology, and we start to put that into data, into zeros and ones, and then look at that on like graphs and lines of like waveforms of your breath.
Yeah, my hope as well, as we're speaking about these things, that listeners can as well continue following us. But I think one last thing just to that I might just want to bring in is how you had located different parts at different locations within my body. And also there were certain themes that had been somewhat guidance for me in terms of what to do within these areas. So like one thing that I still consider from our study group a few months ago was to stabilize the area that one could consider is more the second chakra, let's just say.
Yeah.
Whereas like within the third energy center or the solar plexus, it was really more about softening. Whereas within the fourth energy center, the heart, it's really more about opening.
Yeah.
So stabilizing, softening, opening.
Yeah.
And it's really been profound just to track these different psychological parts and as well map them as well within the physiology, and then see how I can work with them. And just including that as well into the work has been absolutely profound.
Yeah, I love this. I think it's a good overlay just to remember for listeners that when we're working in different areas of the body, we're also looking at the organs that are located in there and their functionality, right? So when we start talking about the abdominal area, we're looking at the small and large intestine, right? And then when we're looking at the diaphragm area, it's how breath is moving through the body and the adrenals and power. And then the heart, which, wisdom traditions and also what we're exploring is about love and hurt, right? And so sharing our love and sharing our gift with the world. So I'm mindful to get too sort of weird and esoteric around chakras, but I want to just, even if we were just to focus on the organs, organ function and the way breath is moving in the body, we can start to look at destabilization of the abdominal wall and how that would impact the small and large intestine, right? Yeah. And so, when you build that stability in your abdominal wall, it then allows for the diaphragm and the rib cage to actually function differently. Yep. Yeah, and so it's nice for the listeners to understand that we're mapping organ function along with the breath, along with movement and physiology, and then we're taking all of that and we're looking at the behavior, and then we're looking at parts and psyche, and we're mapping all of that together. And this is where, it's really technical, but also like we start to become, as a group of practitioners, like skilled in a pretty wide variety of practices, right?
Let's flesh this out a little bit more, and perhaps we can bring our listeners as well up to speed around the 3 diaphragms of breathing. Yeah. And then as well, how the endocrine system or the various numerous glands as well come in as we breathe in this ways, and as well, maybe as well what textures or even theme, or like how is this even relevant to know that the glands are being massaged and impacted as we breathe in this way?
Yeah, so we start with the 3 diaphragms. So we start in the middle at the rib cage, which is the major diaphragm of breath that's well known. And so that's a thin sheet of muscle attached to the bottom of the ribs. On the inhale, it moves down, and on the exhale, it springs up. Its movement down and up varies massively in humans, and the conditioning of the diaphragm is wild. Yeah. It's so overlooked in all manners of sport and physical training. So many people will spend hundreds of hours in the gym every year, but they'll never even consider their diaphragm function. And then the rib cage flare varies on the diaphragm function, intercostal muscles in between the ribs, and then the serratus and pectorals, rhomboids and deltoids are all affecting how that rib cage is moving, which affects the diaphragm function. So that's the sort of middle diaphragm. You can hear the top diaphragm here, which is the vocal cords moving together and apart, and that's how breath is moving through the throat space. The vocal cords holds the breath in and change how it's released from the body. And then the third diaphragm that I'm talking about, the bottom diaphragm is the pelvic floor, and the pelvic floor, along with the abdominal wall, is changing how breath is moving into the pelvic bowl, and that's massaging the small and large intestine. Yeah, those are all conditioned. They're all conditioned habitually, and they're all conditioned variably, depending on what we're doing as a human. I kind of mentioned runners. Runners tend to move in the sagittal plane, like forward, like this. Yeah, very different than someone that's, say, like fighting Muay Thai with a lot of spiraling, right? And so what we do for exercise will condition our muscles and our movement pattern, which will then impact those 3 diaphragms.
And how does that impact us? So as an example, maybe we can explore all 3 of those for a moment and explore what happens when we find dysfunction in the pelvic floor, in the rib cage, or the throat.
Yeah, so in each area, we have a variety of different possible dysfunctions, right? In the pelvic floor, basically healthy operating range. And then on either end of the spectrum, you're going to have pathology. So if the pelvic floor is overly rigid on this side or overly flaccid on this side, we're going to see that's going to create too much gripping, or too much gripping and tension, or too much looseness, right? And then if that's happening in the pelvis, we're going to see like downstream basically adaptive pattern that's going to show up in the knees, even then down into the calves and the feet, and then moving up, it's going to show up on the rib cage. So the pelvic bowl, is sitting here. If there's a movement of the pelvis in any of those directions, then the rib cage that's sitting above it, with the spine in the center, that's going to have to adjust as well, be it the obliques, or the abdominal wall, rectus abdominis, any of the lat or back muscles as well. Yeah, so as soon as the pelvis is compromised, then the rib cage has to compromise, and then the diaphragm is compromised, right? So we're all going to have varying degrees of functionality in each of those areas, But the more dysfunction we have in the pelvis, the rib cage will have to adjust, and then subsequently that's going to lead to a neck movement as well, right? So yeah, I mean, functional movement's great for making sure that's moving well, but then when you're adding in breath, that's going to start pulling that as well. 1 to 6,000 breaths a day, and stuff's going to start to magnify over the course of our life.
And how does it, so these dysfunctions that you're exploring right now, which was more in the realms of anatomy and functional movement, how might that then as well trickle down into their lives, and then as well maybe some of the difficulties that they might experience in their lives?
Yeah, it's good, right? So the contemplation really is around like, okay, so yeah, say like there's someone's over abbed and the abdominal wall is overly tight, right? And so what that means is, if that's conditioned, it looks great on, their profile photos when they're shirtless, or on Instagram, all the things that we see, right? And we see a lot of that around here in Canggu and Bali. But when they sleep, that conditioning might also be present, right? And what that means is there's rigidity in the abdominal wall, and that holding and tension is sending a signal into the organs and the visceral wall and the vagus nerve, and it's saying like, we still got to stay gripped or tight. Yeah. And that just doesn't allow for good mobility of fluid, small and large intestine function, right? And then, we're sitting there for women as an example, that's also the womb and the ovaries are there as well, right? And so suddenly that whole area is gripped and tight. Yeah. So one example. The other example might be that like there's some discomfort there and the abdominal wall starts to blow out, because if the abdominal wall is tighter, there's more feedback up that there's discomfort. So the abdominal wall starts to blow out. And as it blows out, the small and the large intestine have more space, and so does the stomach. And so suddenly there's a lack of feedback coming up now, and that starts to habituate. And then, the client might not have an awareness of if they're full. Yeah. And then there's a lack of pressurization. And then when they breathe, there's not movement. Yeah. So we want this middle way. We want the abdominal wall to be tight, but not too tight.
Got it.
Yeah.
And when we have that, when we have that stability and as well, I guess the right functional movements or the right functions within these three diaphragms, what does that support us within, and like how does that as well help us within our lives, and what does it as well enable?
Yeah, again, it comes back to that range, that healthy range, right? So we've got healthy range. We're able to soften back and relax. We're able to, rest and restore overnight when we're sleeping. We're able to power up and mobilize energy. We're able to be agile in traffic when we're on the scooter. We're able to engage in high velocity sport or activity. We're then also able to have good emotional range. Like as a parent, we're able to meet intensity. We're able to control, anger or frustration when we're dealing with young children. When we're getting into heated discussion with our partner, we're able to recognize when we've lost conscious awareness in like sort of an overview of it, and we're starting to take things personally, and we're replaying old stories from our childhood. So I think the good functionality, it starts physically, right? Yep. And then it goes into mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, but they're all interlinked. Yeah. So yes, we want to work on physiology. But at the same time, we also want to address the mental, emotional, and spiritual components. And if we don't address those, then we can't address physiology. Yep. So if someone's just addressing physiology but failing to look at the other behavioral elements, again, it's just a bit myopic.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think also one of my intentions with, drilling down these questions as well is really helping individuals understand how those maladaptive mechanisms within the physiology, how it as well trickles all the way up to the surface around the behaviors that they might have and the ways that they might be showing up in life. And then as well as a result, the satisfaction that they might feel, the contentment they might feel, what is available to them, what is not available. I mean, I was as well quite clear on the fact within the initial story how I had protected myself in many ways of getting hurt and as well feeling that grief, which had led to a behavioral habituated behavior of isolating myself or wanting to be separate, which didn't actually give me this trust or safety to actually be in relationship
Yeah.
with other people, like
Yeah.
just to begin with,
Yeah.
and then let alone intimate relationships.
Yeah, like you kind of mentioned that, right? There's this, like, on a spectrum there, there's isolation on the one hand and then there's fitting in on the other,
Yeah.
but neither of them are true belonging, right?
Yeah,
And that's where it becomes very, very difficult. I think many of us have grown up with similar kind of aspects within us where we're, kind of hiding parts of ourselves that haven't really been welcomed. Either through isolation or moving away, or like when we're fitting in is just sort of, that suppression, right? Yeah, so we're sort of learning how to sort of, get along together individually and collectively in a much deeper and more vulnerable way.
I wonder if it would be valuable to explore a little bit more fully some of the maladaptions or compensatory patterns that can show up for breathers, but then as well how it might reflect into their lives. As an example, we have this midterm exam within the training that you do, whereas there's a set of different breathing rhythms that you have, and essentially there's, I almost want to say there's certain archetypes that can arise within the way people breathe, but then as well there's a very strong correlation of the type of life that they might be leading with that. So that there is a very clear correlation that I had at least found more through the work that I've as well done with numerous clients now.
Yeah, it's good. Yeah, thank you. Like this midterm exam, right, which we run on our trainings for FBR. It's happening earlier in the trainings now. It's happening. It's happening like around about week 3.
We did it, I think, week 6.
Yeah, and so it's happening. It's happening like kind of like about a quarter of the way through now. So we probably have to call it the first quarter exam. Anyway, the essence of it is, I've been in this work for a long time, and I have a very strong practice of how to functionally move breath in different ways in my body, right? And so I'm kind of a bit of a freak like that now, where I can move my diaphragm around in a lot of different ways. I can sustain various different breathing rhythms for an extended period of time. When I do that, my physiology changes. Like I can feel like my blood chemistry shifting. I can feel my pH changing. So I have this feeling state of how my body is responding. What I'm doing, in kind of like Jonathan Haidt language, is I'm taking my rider and I'm forcing control of my elephant, of my body, right? So my conscious mind is choosing to breathe my meat suit a certain way. And in doing so, it's very, very obvious. Some of the archetypes, like very simple, would just be like only breathing in the belly. So I'm just breathing the diaphragm and it looks like I'm going pregnant and flat, right? So it's just so much breath moving in the belly. Or another, like the opposing, like kind of the archetype of that is only breath in the chest. So there's no breath moving down in the body, and it's just all huge chest flaring of the rib cage, right? And it's comical. Like when I breathe those, it's like very obvious. You're like, it's just like the breath's only in the belly or the breath's only in the chest. And we've got 10 of these breathing rhythms that are quite obvious. And I breathe them, and then the students get to note. And that's the first basis or premise of FBR, is being able to effectively read where breath is moving in the body. And then from that, we can sort of ascertain what are the muscles that are working well, what are the muscles that are working too much, and what are the muscles that are working too little, or are gripped or holding or tense, and what are the muscles that are flaccid, right? So we're starting to build up this picture of like, we understand how breath likes to move in humans, right? And we understand range when we've got muscles that don't activate on the one end of the spectrum, when we've got muscles that are always gripped or holding or hypertonic on the other end of the spectrum and rigid or very short. We start to explore that. And we're looking at the quality of the chain of the muscle. Is it firing fast or slow? And what's the sort of range or texture or quality of the muscle, be it a muscle of movement or breathing, and how does it allow breath to move into the meat suit? Yeah. So, when we start to sort of map that, and we start to see very, very clearly that, when humans breathe this way, they tend to have more tendency towards these behaviors. And I mean, we're always coming across new archetypes every time we work with a new client, right? There's new parts and constellations that are there. But we start to get a sense of certain qualities, right? Rigidity, gripped, holding in the intercostal muscles. Generally, people have some tendency to protect, or they're fearful of, opening their heart, giving or receiving love. So we start to sort of map these and see them very clearly.
when you were sharing the fact that you can bring your rider, quote unquote, into different breathing rhythms and they'll have a very different response on your body, what it really speaks to is how different breathing rhythms will activate or engage, particular emotion. And I want to hear a little bit more about that. I would love for you to just expand a little bit on that. And as well, I think a lot of individuals speak to the fact that breath works on the nervous system. I think anyone who's listening to this type of podcast will know that, yeah, sure, like breath has a very incredible impact on the nervous system, in the sense that, it's the modulator. It's when we inhale, we'll bring a little bit more of a sympathetic tone to our nervous system, whereas when we exhale, we'll bring a little bit more of a parasympathetic tone. So we all got that, and it's awesome. But I want to hear a little bit more around the how it's impacting as well the endocrine system and what the value is in that, and then as well this correlation between breathing rhythms and as well correlating emotions.
Yeah, it's good. Initially, we want to simplify concepts so that we can start to take them on board, and then as they're landing a little bit, we start to create more complexity. When I'm teaching, we want to start with the simple of inhale, exhale, and then we add more and more layers onto that, right? Yeah, breath at the bottom. Yeah, we create a triangle, nervous system here, and then endocrine system here, right? So breath, nervous system, endocrine system, and they're all communicating to each other all the time. Endocrine system being like our glands and changes in our blood chemistry, and then that basically signaling systems, right? So the nervous system, nerves fire electrical impulses along strings of cells in our body, and they're for either firing movement or for sensing and feeling. Yeah. And so that's what the nervous system is doing. The endocrine system is a signaling system using chemicals, hormones, chemicals in our bloodstream to basically signal to different areas of the body and create different cascades of effects. Endocrinology is super technical, and I barely touch into it and like the surface of it. The important thing to understand at this point is when we change our frequency of breathing, we change our endocrine system, right? So our body likes to operate in a very narrow window of pH, and when breath starts to change, it starts to change pH, which starts to change the endocrine system, just on that simple basis. And then what we've started to explore is also how breath and then the pressurization of the breath starts to change the endocrine system as well. And so, the quality of the inhale and the quality of the exhale, along with like the duration and rhythm of that, is also changing things as well. How the diaphragm's moving in the body and the quality of the rib cage expansion and contraction is also changing how much sympathetic and parasympathetic is alongside each other, breath to breath, in sequence. And what we've found is that is then also changing the frequency of the brain. So when we use an EEG to measure the brain frequencies, we're seeing that the breath changing nervous system and endocrine system, and then changing brain function.
So let's ground this into maybe a lived experience that some listeners might have. For individuals who might experience chronic anxiety or maybe more depressive tendencies, like how can you correlate what you had just said back to those things, and how is that playing out for people, just so they understand that?
Yeah, I remember back to a time of my life where I had this wicked combination of both anxiety and depression, right? And it's actually quite remarkable that both are available at the same time. Yeah. And over the years, what I've come to realize, certainly for myself and for most humans, is that the quality of the rib cage, the tightness of the rib cage flare, and the quality of the diaphragm will lead to anxiety. So a gripped rib cage generally is an indication of some quality of fear. And if the rib cage is kind of gripped and stuck, it tends to be anxiety. Okay? And then when the diaphragm is moving, this diaphragm, the ability of the diaphragm to spring up and down again, seems to have some correlation to this quality that we label or feel as depression. It's sort of the I can't. Yeah, and the I can't seems to be a loss of tone of the diaphragm. And that rigidity of like fear, along with the kind of like flaccidity of the diaphragm, leads to this whole area just losing its vibrancy, its ability to actually be innervated and to move. And so then, yeah, of course, breath doesn't move, and then pH gets stagnant, and or pH starts to lose its ability to sort of have any range at all. That impacts the two other systems of the body that help govern pH, which is the kidneys and renal system, and bicarbonate buffering system on a cellular level. So they get compromised as well. And then basically we created this negative feedback loop with breath as the limiting factor that's impacting those other two systems, and then metabolic health is basically going down the pan.
So let's paint a scenario of a breathwork session. Maybe this could be a one-to-one session in a treatment room, or maybe a breather coming as well to one of the shala, and then as well come for a group session.
Yeah.
How can we paint this out in terms of describing a scene of how this might play out as they're breathing, but also what you're going to be doing, and as well how that might impact them in the aftermath. Someone who might be experiencing that anxiety, someone who might be experiencing that depression, and how are you supporting them on the other side of that?
Yeah, it's a big question. We kind of think about the idea of it depends, right? It depends on a lot of different factors. As a facilitator, we want to take in a lot of information around the specific client rapidly. And one of the things that we're training for is how fast can you get a sense of this human, right? So when I look at someone, when I'm looking at physiology, I want to be assessing, the shape of their body, right? And how the joints are kind of holding, right? I want to be looking at the muscle quality and tone. I want to be looking at the color of the skin as well, the vibrancy, or the whether there's an aliveness in redness, or just that sort of sense of does this human look like they're vibrant, right? And so from those, and then where the breath is moving in the body, we kind of get a picture, right? And anytime I work with a client, I'm also assessing a lot of different things around quality of communication, the eye gaze, their ability to engage with me in the ventral vagal, human connection kind of quality as well, right? So I'm taking all of that information in very fast, and then making a decision around how is it that I support this client in getting more in touch with the vibrancy of an inhale and the relaxation of the exhale. And then in that moment, I make a decision to facilitate or not, and then I choose what's the quality of facilitation I'm going to use from a big library of facilitations that I have. And my intention is to guide their system in a way that allows them to get more breath in and essentially more relaxation on the exhale.
Yeah. One of the things I'm reflecting on right now is just, I think what makes this practice so impactful and so unique and so powerful, particularly I'm going to say in one-on-one settings, but also group settings are also just as impactful, is the very tailored and very bespoke nature to this work, in the sense of what you had communicated, that this is not a one size fits all fucking approach.
No.
Where we're projecting a method or a technique onto them. We're literally taking in the human and honoring the uniqueness that's in front of us, and working with that moment to moment. And you also communicated, and it's a very technical thing if you think about it. Also, this idea, you'd often communicated the fact that we're fixing a plane as it's flying.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, this is it, right? You're this humans vary so much, right? One of the things that we do on day 4 of our training is we get everyone to just hold rib cages, and you go around and you hold rib cages, and then what you start to realize is and then the next day you hold necks, and you're like, what the actual fuck, right? The necks are so different. Everyone's neck is so different. And then you start to hold an arm, and you realize arms, they all they look kind of the same, but part of our training is just spending time being with people. And when you are with people, we start to realize wow, there's so much range and variance in humans. It's actually mind-blowing. And so because of that, the nature of this work is we need to meet that specific human in that moment in the way that their system is asking for. Yeah, that's tough. And that's it requires a couple things, a lot of skill and a lot of understanding, a lot of knowledge and also embodied experience, and then a lot of practice. And yeah, that's what we've created here in the school, is the ability to have basically this lab, this way of exploring over and over again until we kind of start to get this way of just being with humans, and then how to support and meet them moment to moment, breath to breath. And it's wildly dynamic. Yeah. And we need range.
A few things I want to bookmark, but I want to touch a little bit more into your teaching style, but also what you bring us through as students when we go through these containers. And I think one of the things that I just want to highlight is the emphasis that you're putting on supporting us in really becoming embodied in this stuff.
Yeah.
Like, what is the value of embodiment in these teachings, and why is that so necessary?
Yeah, thank you. The first thing is like my teaching style is confrontational and provocative, right? And it's sometimes difficult, right? And
I'll vouch for that.
yeah, and I apologize often for it, and it's in service of the student. So often we're raised in an environment where we're given an answer, and I am hesitant to do that.
Why?
I like to, in what you just did with me there, I like to inspire creative thinking and expression, and I want the student to arrive at their own answer. My role as a teacher is to create an environment for thinking. It's to create an environment for emergence and an environment for a new layer or way of understanding. And the way that we do that is giving pieces of information and then giving very tight games or play or exploration within the students so that they start to explore different things themselves. And then I ask, what did you notice? Right? This is the consistent question, is what did you just notice? What did you just see? What did you just feel? What did you just find out? And from that, there comes this collaborative approach to people starting to share their experience, not from a place of, is this the right answer? Or it's just like, this is just what I felt or saw, or like, fuck, wow. Like the neck is like, sometimes it's long and sometimes it's short. And it's just like, cool, why is that? Yeah. Oh, because the vertebrae, but then the spacing is also different. It's like, interesting. Why? And then, because yeah, the way that the muscles or the tendons are pulling the head down and then suddenly we're into this whole like mind exploration. And then that becomes the whole experience, is just this consistent, curious inquiry around like, what is happening here, right? The thing is, that's what we want our clients to get to as well. We want the clients to be in this collective experience or individual experience of what is happening here. And I've guided you on this over and over again. It's like, why do you do that? And I don't know the answer, but I'm wanting to hear it from you or guide you in such a way that we can find it, each other and ourselves.
Yeah, you definitely challenged all the ways that I've learned to learn and educate and essentially move through the world through that entire training, and just fucked me up.
Yeah.
That's just my honest answer to it.
Thank you. It does. It really does, right? It kind of pulls the rug out from under humans. Like in the last training, we had the same as well. We had it where people were coming in and they're looking to me for the answer. They're like, but tell me. And I'm like, I'm not telling you. And I know, but I'm not telling you, right? It's brutal. It is. Yeah, there's a brutality to it, right? And I have to sit in the awkwardness of wanting to give the answer, but at the same time, so wanting you to find it yourselves. 2 questions ago, you asked me, like, what's the benefit of the embodied practice? Well, the answer is you found it yourself. You see, you found your own pathway. I can tell you all these things about the rib cage, but when you find the relief, when you find the relief yourself, you felt it, you know it in that moment. Fuck me, like I'm liberated. And there's no like, well, you got to move the rib cage here and then the diaphragm. I can tell you all of the technicalities. I can show you the pictures of the waveforms that I want to see in your breather, right? But when you've felt it, you know. And teaching from that embodied place is like, I was suffering miserably, you know? And then I wasn't. And something happened and I felt it. And I've gone back into my own body again and again to find those pathways. What comes from that space is belief, right? Is a deep sense of self-belief. And when I'm training a practitioner, I want them to feel that so deeply in their system that they believe in the work. They're like, this thing fucking works because it worked for me. And that doesn't mean it will work for other people. And it doesn't mean it will work for other people in the same way. We've got to be so careful of that projection. And when we extrapolate that across enough data and enough data sets, we start to see that our client is this wonderful puzzle where we can guide them into finding that same experience themselves. And we can eventually.
Yeah. I'm thinking back to some of the times, especially in my first year, where I would be in group breathwork sessions with you, and I would be projecting my father onto you and would be afraid that I'm doing something wrong. And I think that is I won't project that experience to everybody, but I think that can be definitely a common theme that can arise, that the student thinks that they're doing something wrong and looking for the teacher for the right answer. And I think, and this is still something I'm learning from you, to be very honest with you, when I'm in study group with you, which is like this very unique container where we come in together with 4 people. Each of us has a one breathwork journey, and essentially you are the one who's facilitating it, and then there's teaching coming from that. And when I just observe you in that, I think what's so unique about you is you're not going to other teachers to learn more. You're going to your clients, and you're learning from your capacity to be present and your capacity to be curious about what's going on, and inquiring how a certain facilitation as well might impact the breather in one moment. And then from that, there might cascade a whole entire different experience in the breather through which you then might bring another facilitation. And so I don't know if I'm articulating what I'm seeing you doing very well.
Yeah.
Perhaps, refine that if you want. But I think that's the thing that you're so unique in, your capacity to be so curious and to be in this capacity of not knowing, even though you know a shitload, you actually come from a place of not knowing. And what I mean by that is you're not projecting your past experiences with clients onto what is happening in the moment. You might have a lot of data that you are assimilating and you might bear in mind. And of course, that data might as well lead to a certain level of precision that you then bring to that moment. But you are still willing to be constantly curious and be proven wrong. I don't know how well I did that just now.
I love this. I love this. I think you're right. When people watch me work, like there's a lot of things that people have said around the way that I work, right? They're like, it looks like a lot of people say like it's wizardry or magic, or like the level of attunement is just next level. And I'm very appreciative of that. And that's come through a lot of practice, right? I fail faster. Yeah. Like that's it, right? I just fail faster than people. And then when I fail, you can't see it because it's so quick, right? And so I'm just iterating really, really quick. And so I try something and it doesn't work, and I try something else and it doesn't work. I have an enormous library that I can draw from, right? On those over 10,000 hours of client experience, right? And so, I just iterate faster and faster and faster than other people. And I've done that so much now. Yeah.
I think on that note, and this is something that you would actually address on an episode that I still haven't released, but it's definitely happening, is the capacity of a facilitator to actually be with shame, and to sit with shame, to sit with shame around incompetence, to sit with the shame around failing, and it sounds like you have an incredible capacity for that, whereas some individuals, first of all, they might be completely ignorant to the fact that they're not very good, or they're so riddled in their shame that they're not even willing to actually explore and be adventurous and like try something out.
Yeah, it's good, right? I think part of our teaching, part of our practitioner training, it gently pulls people out of both of those, right? Yeah. On the one side is I know what I'm doing, right? Which is an illusion. It's a fallacy. Sorry, like we don't, right? Let's pull ourselves out of that one, right? And then the other one is I'm incompetent, which you're also not, right? So we want enough competence, but enough humility. And those have to sit side by side if we want to be good at this work, right? And that's it, right? So how do I not collapse into my shame, but also how do I not inflate into my pride? Yeah. And how do we just bring those two together where it's just like, got a shit ton of experience and I know I'm really good at this and I still don't know in this moment, and I got a new meat suit here that needs support and I got to figure this out, right? Yeah, so the first thing I do is just put my hands on them and I'm like, what's here? And I start gathering as much information as fast as I can And then through both the practice and childhood neurodivergence, I sum a lot of information very quickly and start to make some adjustments and iterate and see what's there.
One of the things I just want to as well add to the importance of embodiment, which I imagine as well, this is also something that's, you're consciously bringing in, but this is something that I've as well gained as a result of this work and, my years of study in it, is that through my own willingness and through my own capacity to actually go into numerous various different experiences, whether it might be, full expressions of rage or, these incredible, difficult moments of despair, there is a certain level of confidence that comes when I have that capacity to actually really fully go in it, but then not linger in it and actually also have the capacity to come out of it. And by being able to do that, by having that capacity to be emotionally fluid, there's a certain self-belief, to your point, that comes as a result of that, which gives me a certain level of trust as well with any with any breather or client that might come my way. And like, I can really say that without any doubt that whatever comes my way, whatever the client surfaces with, I feel the confidence that I'm able to contain them and support them through that.
It's wonderful. And that's come from your own embodied journey, right? And your willingness to be in all of your different states. That's come from your continued desire to get in touch with the parts of yourself that you've been ashamed of, or you've been scared of, or you've had some guilt around feeling, right?
Yeah.
And to just really come home to them and bring them home and hold them and be tender with them and come home to yourself. And because you've both done that and continue to do that and dive in more deeply, you're willing to be with people in that.
Yeah. And I think, I guess I want to maybe paint it a little bit away from just me around that, but I also just the importance you're placing on every practitioner to actually do that and go on this journey.
Yeah.
Because it's, as I see it at least, essential, for us to actually be really good practitioners.
Yeah, this is where, Stephen Hassano, our CEO, right? He loves this idea of what he calls community of practice. And community of practice is this desire of us to cultivate a collective that supports itself and each other, right? In the world of the FBR team, right? Which is where that we acknowledge, we need to keep in our own practices and supporting each other in a really good and healthy way. I'm breathing, pretty much every 3 weeks right now in Circle. Thursday nights. Love coming to the Thursday night there and dropping in and being in my own practice. We need to stay in it. And that's where, for me, it's sometimes difficult and or painful when we train people and they leave and then we don't see them for like 2 years. I have no idea where they're at physically, mentally, emotionally. So I love cultivating that community of practice and staying in that. And connecting in other ways as well, be it like going for a sauna and hanging out. But I think there's something about like supporting each other that's really important.
Help us understand the importance of a relationship, whether it's within the therapeutic context of working with someone one-to-one, or even in the group context. How does keeping it relational, or the relational aspect of it, how does that actually support us in really moving through these aspects that might be frozen in time, but also how we can come out feeling more empowered?
I'm going to edge into some tender and potentially difficult territory here, where it's just like business is also the vehicle for exploring our patterns and our culture and environment in our business area can be a really big mirror, a really big reflector. There was a time within the organization where I was holding a lot, and that was also showing up in a lot of different areas of my life. And it was ultimately an over-responsibility from my childhood. I was holding a lot of my family container growing up in a lot of different ways. I was parentified as a child, and even if you research that, you understand that basically given too much responsibility too young, for a lot of different reasons. But also took that on willingly, right? A willingness to be with that responsibility. for all of the different things it got me safety, it got me validation, it probably got me love, right? And so I kind of showed up in a certain way in the organization in that same way. And it's been a wonderful like 2 years of pulling back from that. And what's happened is people that benefited from my holding of the container and over generosity in a variety of different ways have left. Yeah. And so what I'm saying about that is the people that are here now within our organization that have been here for some years, right? Some of them that are still here and showing up in a good way. Yeah, they're relating in a good way. They're relating to the breath in a good way and to the practice in a good way. And what's important in that longer term relationship, you know, like as an example, like the way I communicate and relate to Stephen, our CEO, is direct, right? It's all on the table, and there's a deep understanding. It's been really tough over the years to have people unwilling to communicate. You know, where I want to sit down and have conversations over and over again. Like I'll do that as long as it takes until I'm understood, until I understand that other person. Like that's what I'm here for. And when people refuse to communicate, because it's just too tough for them to look at their own parts, there's no way for them to stay in relationship anymore. And there's a rupture that's not reconcilable. And that brings me a lot of grief. Yeah. And I suppose that's like an idealistic part of me that, you know, I've learned to get real with over the years, right? It's impossible for a lot of people in the way that they've been raised to stay in right relationship. So yeah, I still want to sit in circle. And if people have a sense that they've been wronged by me or the organization, or if they step outside of the agreements and they choose to leave, it's tough for me. Yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing as well your personal experiences around this and how that might have as well impacted you, but also what role you might have played.
I have a deep desire for harmony, right? That's really where it's coming from. And sometimes I've been massively responsible for creating, like very unhealthy dynamics in the organization through overgiving or, that receiving people's projections in a variety of different ways.
Would you like to add anything for people listening in right now or viewing this, and maybe as well illuminate a little bit the value around the relational aspect of the like this work, in the sense of, you know, coming together with a practitioner, but also being in the group context where they are with other breathers? Like, what is the value of being seen in these ways and allowing these things to come to the surface? You know, to your point, like, you know, certain people might have not been available for certain communications, and what it touches on for me is that it would provoke certain aspects of them to come to the surface that they might not be ready to yet reveal or show in relationship.
Yeah.
So this is what relationship touches on, and I just want to speak to the importance of that for people who are curious about this.
Yeah, I love this. I teach in circle. My workshops are in circle. I sit in circle. I resolve conflict in business in circle. And it's just the way that, like, you pass a talking stick around and around until everything's understood. You pass it as many times as you need to for as long as you need to, right? Until people are really heard and understood. And like you said, like what happens in circle is you got like multiple people watching you, and they're going to see different things. And the reality is, like, you eventually get seen. Yeah. And you have to embrace the parts of you that haven't really been seen before. That's really tough, right? This idea of isolation that you kind of spoke to, it does a couple of things, but it keeps us safe because we're not seen. And circle requires us to have a willingness to be seen. It also, like, the circle also needs to be safe enough to be seen in that, right? So I think relationally, the benefit of sitting in circle is that, the parts of us that are actually just really normal and tender and human, they get to be loved and accepted, and we get to like welcome them in as well.
Yeah, if I reflect as well on the group work that I've done, which has been a lot, especially over the first few years, I just reflect as well on the importance of those shares that we had at the beginning, but also towards the end, where we got an opportunity to share to our experiences of what we had lived within our breathwork journeys.
Yeah.
And especially, there's been numerous instances as well where I just felt so opened as a result of that experience, which had given me a deeper courage, I'm going to say, or permission almost to share more than I might usually when I'm so, guarded in my default ways of operating. And I'd reflected as well on how, later on in aftermath, there was a bit of that vulnerability hangover that would come, right? And almost a sense of like, oh shit, did I share too much here? Like, will I be accepted? But I think, like, yeah, maybe I'm not selling it really well here, but
it's good.
I do want to communicate the fact how important it was for me to go through these stages.
Yeah, I love it, Ray.
And how as well I accepted and loved I was with whatever was like being revealed. And as a result of being accepted and loved by others, I got to then end up finding that for myself.
Yeah, it's good, right? And also others not accepting or loving it. And then having to find that within themselves that they don't yet accept and love.
Right.
Right. And then being like, God, that fucking lemon guy, there he is talking again about how much he's achieved, or there he is talking about his heart, or there he is talking about his parents, or talking about, you know, his lover, or whatever it is, right? And really in that moment, what they can't do is do the same thing.
Yeah.
There's a subtle level of, maybe some resentment or some shame or some harsh criticism. And that's the thing with Circle. The first time I started working in this way, like in a group setting, and I wasn't a facilitator, right? I was a student participant. A couple things were there, right? I was fucking terrified of being seen. As the talking stick was coming around, I was thinking about what I was going to say before I was even there, right?
Classic.
And then in any movement practice, the level of like, how do I look and how am I being accepted? The level of that was just beyond, right? And it took me years to become comfortable in the space of just it moving, expressing, talking, and being free. And I've spent thousands of hours in our teaching space. I feel very at home there. And yeah, I love it as people become habituated to it. That space feels like home. By the end of a training, people come back in there and they're like, just relax. This is just here, right? There's something about the container that we've built. This is huge bamboo space, right? There's something about that space and the way that it's been cultivated and created and curated that allows people to have a deep sense of safety in the space because of the way that we share, because of how people show up.
Yeah, epic, man. I want to segue in a moment here, but just a thought that I want to bring that somewhat touches on what you had just said around, you know, sometimes people won't accept you, won't love you. Like, and I guess one of the things that I've recently been reflecting a lot on is how we can create these incredible spaces where I'm going to say there is a field or an environment of safety, or that encourages at least that, you know, and that can be amazing, and that can as well provide people with an opportunity to actually experience safety. I think for me, that is actually only one aspect of the stepping stone. Like for me, like something I'm reflecting on, and maybe this is as well unique or distinct to me and you know, other individuals who might find themselves in that role, but like just considering this idea of being a leader or being a pioneer in, you know, a certain way of operating, like, you know, especially with this modality, you know, like just consider like, you know, you're definitely a pioneer in bringing that forth, and then a pioneer myself as well in wanting to support that mission. And I won't be accepted all the time. I won't be loved all the time. I will be criticized in certain moments. And for me to actually look for that belonging and that validation from others is actually a disservice to the mission that might be present. That doesn't mean that I'm of course not going to listen to what might be there, and actually as well have the capacity to self-reflect on what might be arising or coming up, and like really refining what is true here in the moment, and you know, maybe look at as well at some aspects of myself that maybe need to be refined or explored. But I think to me it really touches on the importance as well around finding that sense of belonging, not just externally in a certain environment, but actually also within ourselves, that regardless of what happens, regardless of what another says, that we don't actually lose that sense of belonging within ourselves.
Yeah, I love that. It's connecting really deeply to your mission and your purpose and what you're here to share and what you're really here to do. And as we talked about with my teaching style, like every training we have 2 or 3 people that ask for a manual, and it's never going to happen. Like, you know, other people might do that and people want to write their own, and that's fine. But I don't teach in that way, right? And that's true for me. That's just how I'm going to do it. And there's going to be difficulty and challenge every single training with those people that want to read a book. I'm not here to teach in that way, right? Because what I really want is for the answers to be emergent from within you. And what that allows you to do is let the criticism wash over, because you're so sure of what it is that you're doing and what you're witnessing in your client and what they're sharing with you, but what you're seeing in their physiology and their nervous system and in their emotional expression, to know that this is effective.
Yeah, I don't know how current that still is, but I remember you having a manual, which was, big textbook, and it was completely empty. And then
It's a blank book. It's like, yeah, go write it, right? I also think it's important, right? People need to write their own manual as a beautiful way of really like synthesizing what the FBR means for them. There's a fluidity in this that, it is difficult for certain people in our organization, and I will continue to be difficult in that way. And I'm okay with that. I do acknowledge the difficulty as well. Like, let me be really clear. Like, I understand it's tough. It's not going to change. Yeah.
Let's segue. And I think this is an important conversation I really want to bring in, because a lot of listeners might not be aware of these things. And I want them to understand the dangers of breath work. I want them to understand the things to watch out for. And for me, it's not about, making this right, quote unquote, and then shaming others and then making that wrong. But I just want to have a genuine conversation around the risks and the dangers that might be present around certain aspects. So there was 4 things that I wrote down that I think could be valuable for us to explore, and I would just love your perspectives on it.
That's great. I love it. Yeah, like I've been overly critical in the years in the past, right? I just want to acknowledge, like, everyone's doing their best with this work, right? Whatever it is that they're trying to share, right? And obviously, like, they have connected to something that's worked for them and they want to keep sharing it. And there's environmental and economic factors that they're choosing to operate in a certain way. And sometimes people are making a lot of money out of sharing certain practices that may or may not be effective, right? So it is just what it is. Yeah, I've moved away from being so critical about it, or saying like, there's only one way. It's kind of like, it depends, right? Again, right now, like, when I'm chatting with the boys and we're talking, like my kids are like, when we're talking about food, I have to bring like, I like to bring in this idea that like, yeah, ice cream's great sometimes, but not all the time, And so it's just like, there's just things that are good sometimes, but not all the time, right? So it's the same with breath. Yeah, it's just like, look, we don't want to just breathe high volume all the time for obvious reasons, right?
Yeah, so I appreciate that. And I think something as well that I might just want to as well explore is just maybe as well some, I guess, of your values that might be present in certain decisions that you make.
Yes.
Like, for example, I see that one of them is the importance of containment.
Yeah.
And as a result, there are certain decisions that you make in terms of, and there's also certain agreements that, if you want to uphold, being a part of, this modality and in this work, that you need to agree to uphold.
Yes.
Which is, we're not offering this online.
Yes.
So tell me more about that. Why do we offer this online?
Yeah, like, I've only worked in person, and I continue to work in person. It's just what I love, right? And it's what I love, but also, like, when we're working with breath and physiology, touch is essential.
Yes.
One of the first big experiences I had with a skilled facilitator didn't have touch, and I needed it. And it created a lot of difficulty for me for 6 months or a year afterwards, for a few different reasons, right? I mean, I was in a very tough space myself. But really, I just value touch, because touch and physical touch and connection and support is sometimes needed for, the ability for us to stabilize during a really big experience. And online, that's just not available. I'm also incredibly frustrated when I work online. Like, if I would be like, I'm on a Zoom call with a friend or something like that, and I'm just like, it's just right there on the ribcage, it's like, so yeah, like, I think, when I've been like, I do, my work online involves working with my research team in Europe, right? So I'm on a Zoom call and we're talking, and I just sometimes I want to give them a hug, right? So it's like, you just don't have that capacity here. So it's online.
Can we elaborate a little bit more on the importance and the value as well of the body work that is included with the breath work? Because, in a sense, conscious connected breath work, which is, the technique that we're using for the breath, at least, is one that's, very widely used.
Yeah.
But the body work that's included with that, that's unique.
Yeah, FBR bodywork's evolved over the last kind of really like 7 years,
Yes.
right? With a lot of different bodywork specialists that I've engaged with, you know, and that's been the way that I've learned, has been through like receiving touch work and massage from a lot of different people. The FBR protocols are very, very unique. CCB, just looping breath, is a modality that's shared widely. You can just keep looping breath. You can keep breathing wrong for a long period of time. Like you can go and have a breath practice and keep just breathing the same way over and over again. You might get some results and it might change slightly. But really what I've noticed is until you get hands-on and you're shown how things can move, until the body is shown a way with touch that it can open or move a different way, it won't really break out of its safe, contained default mode network in the same way as when you bring touch on.
It's just next level, man.
Yeah.
It really is, man.
Yeah, and it could be a flare of the rib cage, or it could be a movement of the diaphragm down, or a mobilization of an arm, or a movement of the head. But suddenly, the nervous system is shown like you're safe to move in this way, and it just goes like, oh, wow, oh, and then this whole area is liberated. Yep. And then the exhale falls out, right? Yep. You're just not going to access that without touch, without good quality touch. Like online, it's not available. 1 to 50, it's not available. Yeah, so... You know, I just really believe in good quality touch work that's attuned and, based on breath mechanics.
And this is also the reason why you limit the amount of people as well in group breathwork sessions from 1 to 5. So 1 facilitator for 5 breathers and a max amount of people of 20, I believe. Yeah,
there's 2 reasons for that, right? So the ratio of breather to facilitator is just so that everyone gets adequate touch work support. And if big reflexes start to move or run, or big breath patterns or big experiences are in the room, there's enough facilitator to support people effectively. And max 20 is just like 20 people in a space is kind of, it's enough for me to remember everyone's intention. Yes. It's enough for me to track their nervous systems and see what's going on, enough for me to hold it. Yeah. I like 16. Our Shal is built for 16. That's kind of my sweet spot. As soon as we get into like 25 people, if I stand in the middle of the room, I look around, I can't have a good sense of what's going on. Yeah, and that allows people to wander into, potential breath rhythms or experiences that aren't safe, or that are moving them into like red line experiences, which I want to avoid personally.
Yeah, and I think that is just maybe as well just something to touch on, and again, just not maybe to as well draw criticism, but like more towards just awareness for breathers who might be genuinely curious and they just don't know. Like they just don't know. Yeah. But like if I think about, there's certain, styles that might be more promoting very active forms of breathing, and there's almost this illusion that if one has a big experience, that is healing. And it's just not true.
Look, I think this idea comes from this idea of like you got to feel it to heal it, right? Which isn't true, right? And then the next thing is we don't want to feel something if we can't hold or contain it. So we firstly need to build the container that we can hold the experience, and then we want to go into the experience. And so if you add a lot of breath into a system, you can start to break away the protective mechanisms in the default mode network too much, too soon, too fast, and you bring on an experience, psychologically, emotionally, or in a deep catharsis that the human can't actually hold or contain. And then you send them out into the world. And then they don't really know what to do with that, right? And so, we have to be very careful and aware of gently opening a system. And what that means is like super gentle attuned touch and working gradually with the ideas of pendulation and titration. So moving into and out of an experience and then gently taking a little bit of it at a time.
Yeah, and operating as well within the window of tolerance, of what one individual can essentially capacitate with the intensity that is moving through them.
Yeah. And what that means is we need to recognize again that this is like a very custom and unique experience, breather on breather, session on session.
I think the last thing just on that in terms of the dangers, I think what I just valued so deeply is within the training that I'd done with you was just the importance placed on keeping this grounded in the understandings of the nervous system, grounded in the understandings of trauma, and essentially how to move through trauma, and also really bringing, just deep fundamental understandings to like what is really necessary in order to actually facilitate the space to move through these experiences and actually come out on the other side, feeling contained, but also feeling like we actually complete these experiences without opening something up that is essentially uncontained. I guess my question to you is, there's so many different like schools now out there, and I think like breathwork is so deeply on the rise, and like I think also one of the unfortunate things about it is just the absence of regulation within that. And so I wonder if you have your own thoughts to share around what things are fundamental and essential to really be a good facilitator within this work.
Yeah, that's I think it comes back to ethics, like on a very deep level, right? Around the difficulty of this concept of do no harm, right? And sometimes we have to be provocative and courageous in the way that we're going to facilitate, so that we're taking someone into an edge. And I think, to be a really good facilitator, it comes back to having had a lot of experience in the breath. We have to have had a lot of body work done on ourselves. We have to, really explore deeply and consistently this work over and over again. And then we have to, make some commitments to ourselves as a practitioner to work in integrity around the amount of clients we're going to work with and our own energy levels, and clarity around communication around rates and frequency. I think, and then just making sure that we're humble in our level of experience, right? And staying open to continue to explore and learn, receiving feedback from our clients consistently, and being willing to really check in and be like, maybe that is relevant, maybe that is important. And then also, what it comes back to is staying engaged with the community of practice and continuing to work with mentorship and reflection from peers as well.
I think one of the things that I really just appreciate as well about you and all the ways that I've learned with you through the years, it hasn't just been about sheer skill, or like just these fundamental understandings. It's almost like the beginning, whereas like there's a deeper philosophy, a deeper way that, I feel like in many ways you're subtly and not so subtly teaching, that had consistently come through.
Yeah, probably.
All right, brother. Well, I think one of the things that I just don't want to close our conversation out with, which I feel is an important topic for me to address, and I'm sure you would as well eagerly love to express a little bit, is you've been doing a lot of research over the last few years, and I want to give you the space just to share about it. And I want to hear a little bit about the discoveries that you've been making, and anything you might want to share around that.
Yeah, thank you, bro. We're entering into a very interesting time right now where previously to be a journalist, you needed some quality of reputation, education, skill, accreditation, and you would have an editor, and what you would write in the newspaper or put out on television was reviewed in some way, right? And there was impact for that. And with the advent of social media, anyone became capable of broadcasting. And it was less about the quality, but more around like the kind of, the potentiality for people to engage with it. And what that meant was shock or like novelty became an attractor for attention. And then as that attention, magnified, algorithms started to give it more energy. And that becomes polarizing. And what that means is you end up with people who only eat meat, right? And you end up with people that... that only drink juice, right? And so it's polarizing, and essentially what it leads to is stupidity, right? And so that's the pre-frame, because what's happening right now with breath is we start to see these polarizing ideas that like only mouth breathing is good or only nose breathing is good, or you got a 6-second inhale, 6-second exhale. Well, these are all reductionist, myopic, and you know, polarizing approaches. They don't build for like nuance and complexity, right? And social media is like, you know, ultimately like a movement away from nuance and complexity into stupid generalizations, right? And the intersection of like TikTok and like mental health advice is categorically dangerous, right? And so that sort of rant is based on the fact that I'm still quite unsatisfied with where I'm personally at and where we're at as an industry when it comes to breathwork, right? The lack of research that's here is really unacceptable for me. And so what that meant was I had to start looking around at the way that research was conducted and how we were going to move forward, and started to devote time, energy, and resources into research. And like everything else, I fail fast. So yeah, we've had quite a few failures. 3 years in, I'm happy to say we're starting to get some traction now, right? So a lot of things happened. The first thing was like this idea of do no harm. I wanted to get clear that I appeared to be doing good work, but I wanted to be sure, right? And I thought my life was getting better, and I was measuring it with a variety of metrics, but I also wanted to have like some concrete evidence. And so, yeah, we started to move into an evidence-based, data-driven approach to breathwork. And we needed to do that with wearables. And so we needed to start gathering data. And so, yeah, we started to explore with a variety of different wearables and a lot of different companies. And we started to invest, sometimes heavily and sometimes into surface area devices. And we tried a lot of different things. In the last 2 years, we've tried quite a few devices, both breath specific and in the brain. And yeah, we started to gather a lot of data. And now we've just finished building our own app. And yeah, we've done our first test of that, both on Android and on iOS systems. And we're able to now gather data directly into our app on a cell phone and then punch it up to our cloud and then start to review it. So our next phase is going to be building out, one of the largest data sets of breathing mechanics in the world. And from that, like, huge volume of data that we'll have, we'll start to be able to better analyze and then understand what's going on in a few different areas. One is in top-down breathing, so like in pranayamas, Wim Hofs, or guided breathwork meditations. The other one is in baseline sets, so we can give a baseline set to a client and get them to breathe a certain rhythm and see what's going on both in the body and in the brain. And then the third one is in a full journey, like guiding people in an FBR journey with an annotator, gathering all of the data and information around what's working when. And there's a few things that we're going to do. We're going to like firstly demonstrate that this work is effective, right? I want to put data to that, measuring, how the brain is functioning, heart rate and heart rate variability, and a few other metrics that would work with that. And then also I want to iterate how we can get better at our protocols. So when to use certain interventions and when to avoid them based on nervous system function.
Anything that surprised you throughout this work over the last 3 years, or anything that's been validating for you in terms of your discoveries of the, I'm going to say, potency of facilitated breath repatterning?
Rapid baseline changes for sure. Like we've seen a lot of those.
What does that mean?
Basically, it means like, when we bring through like small interventions, there's huge shifts in the body, nervous system and brain, and the data to start backing that up. So that's nice, right? How little we know, like it's just terrifying. And also, when we start to explore, Gideon, my research assistant, him and I, we're working pretty heavily as well with AI, and how inaccurate so much of the information currently is. Like when we start looking at our data sets and what's currently out there as beliefs in the breathwork world, how wrong it is, right? And then also like what a frontier we're on, how so much of this has never been done before. And it's alarming, right? That this hasn't been well researched or documented. And so we're kind of like this small outfit in Bali that's self-funded. And we're starting to edge beyond like what well-funded, research institutions are doing. And that's really exciting. And I think, in the next year or 2 years, we're going to have something that's really groundbreaking, which I'm really excited about. But that's been also shocking and surprising that Like, we're breathing this much. Why do we spend so much time, energy, and effort researching so many different things, but breath's been so overlooked?
Yep.
It's kind of heartbreaking, but it just is what it is, and we're here to change it.
Yeah, it's quite wild for me, like, if I think about it, like, just how much of a movement meditation has had yoga, even tantra, I would say is like kind of like together with breathwork, like on such a rise. But I wonder why there hasn't been so much focus on breath, or the millennia that we know about it, through these ancient philosophies, wisdom teachings.
Yeah, I think directly, there's a few reasons right now. One is the work that I do initially on face value looks very boring, right? And a lot of it is there's a persistence that's required to really understand, right? To really get into this stuff, you have to be like really into it. My desire, like my depth of like my practices comes from my suffering. Like, I was so fucked up that I really need to go in so deeply to this work to create like this deep embodied understanding and sense of like connection to myself. Yeah. And that motivates me really, really deeply. And so, yeah, I think that motivates me beyond like the boredom. Suddenly it becomes fascinating. It becomes so interesting. The other thing is it's free. Like, when we get good at this work, like when we get good at this practice, like you said, like I don't need teachers anymore, but I want time. I want more time. I want to spend 2-3 hours a day in this shit. I love it so much. I'm so fascinated by that, right? So I think there's no obvious, clear at this point business model for a lot of companies to invest into it. And then I think also within that, it's really complicated. It's really difficult and complicated. And, we spend so much time scratching our heads and looking at the data and trying to figure more stuff out. And it's tech. And so I think people back away from it. Yeah, because it's just difficult. So I think those are, the potentially initial boring sense of it, the fact that it doesn't appear easy to monetize on the face value, it is, and we'll get to that later. And then, I think, the sheer difficulty of it.
Yeah. Anything you want to add on that topic, or anything else that feels important to address in this idea of research or?
Just so we're onto something like really groundbreaking, and now at this point, like, it's getting very exciting. And as we start to build the data out and we start to get into this a little bit more deeply, interacting, what we're doing with AI, with touch work, with connection, with relational dynamics, I'm really hopeful for humanity and the impacts that it will have individually and collectively. And then how that will impact like the world, ecology, systems, finance, economy. Like I'm very hopeful about that. And I'm also fairly, realistic as well, having been humbled a lot in the last 5 years.
What would you say is a hope that you have in terms of how this work of facilitated breath repatterning is spread, and also what impact it might have for humanity?
Yeah, in the next kind of 5 years, I'm confident that we'll build up like a really good sort of Western scientific methodology around the data of how beneficial this is, and simultaneously create a very humanitarian approach to reducing the barriers to access. Which means creating like a larger scale FBR training team and doing a lot of humanitarian work, bringing this into cultures and communities that want to engage with it and understand it, and that have like a deep wisdom tradition of connection and touch and therapeutic modalities that are relational.
Yeah, it's exciting for me, man, and I would absolutely love to have more individuals have access to this, and I guess really as well bring it back to this very intimate way of working, and that can be possible and available, and it doesn't have to be commodified in the ways that it currently is, but also being spread in these ways that I don't personally align to, with massive groups and all that stuff, and actually support individuals in ways that is helpful to them.
Yeah, thank you, bro. Yeah, it's a difficult, complicated, and important challenge that you and I are committed to. And I know I'll be working at this and with this for the rest of my life. I'm excited to get older and to have more practice and more experience and hopefully a little bit more wisdom. And I remain very, very committed to this, and it's very exciting. It keeps me very motivated, and it brings a lot of meaning to my life.
Well, man, this has been awesome. I mean, almost we're pretty much 2 hours in, bro. It was rich, man.
Yeah.
I feel full. I feel like we explored a lot. My real hope with this conversation and this podcast has really been that listeners and viewers can get, I guess, a touch as well of how meaningful this practice is to me, how meaningful this practice is to you, the potency of it, and like just how deep this practice actually goes in comparison to, maybe some of the other styles out there. And, they all have their value in their own, right way. But like, this is really something unique, man. And, like you know me, I would say better than most individuals do. And, I have always been this curious soul that, even though I found this practice, I needed to continue exploring. I needed to continue discovering and make my own sense of, okay, like, where do I really put my energy? Where do I really put my focus? And having explored far and wide different continents and all that, I continue coming back to this, man, because it's just so damn fucking powerful.
Yeah, thank you, bro. I'm really honored that you do, right? Because you have a huge depth and breadth in the explorations and practices. Many teachers, many more teachers than I've had over the years, right? And the fact that that wild explorer within you has chosen to go out there and do that. It's been an incredible chapter to witness you in, and I've had a lot of admiration for you in your ability and drive and motivation to keep doing that. The fact that you would circle back to FBR and choose it as a path that you want to continue to practice, but also to share and then to train people in, fills me with a lot of joy, and I'm excited to support you on that journey as well.
And I think the reason why is just because it has everything, Yeah, to your point of me, choosing this practice, I guess what it speaks to for me is just the like volume of how encompassing it is for me in terms of the things that are important to me, and I had to explore within the breath. For me, it's around masculinity, it's around emotional resilience, it's around relationships, it's around sex, it's around self-leadership. Like all of these buckets, these 5 that I mentioned, all of it comes back to this practice. And I see how it is such a holistic ecosystem for me to continue exploring that, but also refining my skills so I can as well support other people in that. So I think it's just a testament to this work. But also, I guess the thing I also just want to just mention, whether it's for a practitioner, but also just for someone who's really looking to be supported right now, I think there is an importance around, very similar like a novice within a martial art, or like someone who's stepping into the monk life. I think there's an idea around, we have to really refine the skill. And we have to continue sharpening the skill. And, whatever desired state we might have, whether it's peace, contentment, joy, like that's not going to be given to us, man. Like we need to fucking earn that. That's at least, my idea around it.
Thank you, bro.
We really need to fucking put in the work if this is what we want. Like that's what I've needed to do.
Yeah, there's no mastery here, right? That's the harsh reality with this work is just this a continued learning, and a continued exploration. When it comes to the human body, we can continue to gather more skills as a touchwork practitioner, and more awareness when it comes to working with parts and talk therapy and or conversation to guide people. We can continue to gather more skill sets, schemas, ability to recognize pattern and behavior. So I think we need to humbly admit, when we're in this work, that we're just going to keep learning, and that's okay. And also that, to date, this is the most effective modality that I've found, and I'll continue to keep sharing that because of it. Yeah,
I can vouch for that, man. Where can our listeners find you?
The wonderful and dreaded Instagram, just Edward Dangerfield. And or if you want to email me, old school, it's edwarddangerfield@gmail.com. We're about to go live on the breathing organization. So the breathing organization, the breathing.org, is going to be where we'll have a lot more of our information around future research projects and FBR team globally as well.
Exciting, man. Exciting. I guess I just want to as well leave it with this last comment around the fact that first of all, I've just been on this massive journey over the last 4.5 years, almost 4.5 years with you. But also, like, I just reflect on how I'd been so refreshed and enlivened within this work over our most recent work, where we work together one-on-one. If I think about as well the range that's been explored and all these different expressions that had come through within that, I just reflect on, and this is something I'm comfortable to share here. Like, I think about in my last session with you where you'd asked me to sit, like to lie down, face down, and for me to have that capacity to be in my deepest despair for roughly 10 minutes and then to be rolled over and then 15 minutes later laugh with you around the absurdity and the ridiculousness of life, and then come out of that experience feeling very settled and, essentially like having had the capacity to move on with my day. Like that resilience, I would call it, if I may provide that to myself, that's exciting to me.
Yes.
And I think there is something very rewarding for me. And if I think about the man that I used to be 9 years ago and how he would have dealt with grief and how he would have dealt with heartbreak, it breaks my heart that individuals don't have this and don't have this access point, and how they're then brought into other places to actually essentially tend to the pain, and to now feel that there is a genuine pathway forwards with all of this. This has been incredibly meaningful for me, man. So I just want to say thank you to that.
Yeah, you're welcome. And I think it's beautiful that, the remembering of our own difficulty, our own heartbreak, our own suffering is what continues to motivate us on this path. And that we have a desire for that sense of liberation from ourselves that we're feeling. We have a desire for other people to experience that as well. And celebrating that within you.
Yeah, thanks, man. I don't have a very fancy parting question for you, but I wonder if there is anything else that hadn't been communicated, anything that you would have loved to share, or maybe for me to love to ask you, that you would still like to leave our listeners with, who had, listened very patiently for over 2 hours now.
Yeah, I think the only thing it comes back to right now at this point in my life and this time is hope. And I think hope's a really potent thing. It can be very dangerous and damaging as well to have misplaced hope. But I have a deep sense of hope right now. Mm-hmm. And I would like people to, connect into that a little bit more. Mm-hmm. And just as a contemplation to move forward with that as well.
Yep. And I also have something to add here, which is I've been reflecting and contemplating on this idea that the pursuit for happiness might be a misnomer and might actually not be the very thing that we're after, and maybe as well should be on the search for. But rather, it's more around this idea of like truly being alive, truly being a participant of life. Like, this is something I really have been contemplating since our last session, where I mentioned to you, like, I don't know if I'll say at the end of the life, like, this has been an like a happy, joyful life in that sense. I think there's a difference as well between happiness and joy. Definitely joyful. But I can definitely tell you, I fucking send it, man.
Yeah.
And I went through it.
There's this richness, right? And I also shared, right? No one will take that away from you.
Exactly.
And I think that's bold. And I think it's important that we think about, like, regulation, like, of the nervous system, and isn't like a tightening in and a squashing down of what we're allowing ourselves to experience, right? What you're communicating is this enormous range of the human experience, but your ability to hold that.
Yes.
And that's what you've cultivated.
Yep.
And that's what you'd like others to have as well.
And with that, I want to close it on my favorite ever quote, which is by Joseph Campbell, Power of Myth, his book. And I have it here on my phone, so I'll just read it out loud. People say that we're all seeking is a meaning for life. I don't think that's what we're really seeking. I think what we're seeking is an experience of being alive, so that our life experiences on the purely physical plane will have resonances with our own innermost being and reality, so that we actually feel the rapture of being alive. All right. I'll leave it here on that note. I hope you got a lot of value from this conversation. As always, feel free to pay it forward to anyone who might receive value from it. And until next time, signing off. Thank you for listening to this episode. Your time and attention is truly appreciated. If you enjoyed the show, make sure to subscribe to stay tuned for my upcoming episodes. And in case you know somebody who would find this episode helpful, I encourage you to pay it forward. Finally, if you've personally been receiving value from the show, one way you're able to support this podcast is by leaving a 5-star rating and a written review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Not only does this help more people find the show, but it also supports me in bringing more incredible guests on for the future. I'm your host, Alex Lehman, and until next time, signing off.